Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine a book, right?
Yeah.
Starts out kind of small, quiet success, then boom, explodes into this global phenomenon. Completely reshapes the whole genre. You know the name, even if you haven't read it, A Game of Thrones. So today, we're diving deep into George R.R. Martin's epic fantasy novel, A Game of Thrones. It's the first book in his huge history. A Song of Ice and Fire series came out way back in August '96. And for this deep dive, you've given us this massive stack of insights, basically straight from its Wikipedia page. It's got everything, plot, background, how critics saw it, some really fascinating takes on it all. Our mission really is to cut through all that information,
Yeah.
and pull out the most important bits, the key knowledge, the insights. We'll dig into the plot lines, those complex threads, uncover some surprising stuff about how it was created, and talk about how it just redefined modern fantasy. Think of it as like your shortcut to really getting why this one book became such a big deal. So kicking things off, what strikes you first about how this whole thing even began?
Well, what's really remarkable, I think, is how the novel's own story, going from these modest beginnings to this cultural titan, it almost mirrors the epic scale of the story inside the book. It kind of makes you ask, what actually makes literature stick around? What makes it endure?
And Martin's own journey is pretty wild, too. You mentioned he didn't exactly come from privilege.
Mm-hmm.
Bayonne, New Jersey, poor family,
Mm-hmm.
selling horror stories for nickels when he was a kid. How did that background, plus, his later career shifts, shape the world of Westeros, that gritty feel?
Oh, that background is absolutely key. I mean, he had early success, right? Novels like Dying of the Light, Fever Dream won 3 Hugos by '83. But then the Armageddon Rag, total commercial disaster.
Yeah.
That basically put the brakes on his novel writing for a while, and that's
Right.
what led him to TV writing, The Twilight Zone, Beauty and the Beast.
Right, so he was getting paid well, but creatively.
Or maybe not so fulfilled.
Frustrated by budgets and shows getting canceled early.
Exactly. He talked about that frustration. And it seems like that period, ironically, kind of fueled his desire for a project with no limits, no network notes, no budget constraints.
So it's summer '91. He's working on a sci-fi novel, not fantasy. And then this idea just hits him.
Just like that, he had this image, really vivid, a boy seeing a beheading, finding direwolf pups in summer snow. Wrote that first chapter in just a few days, sketched out a map, banged out maybe 100 pages, sent it off to his agent, and initially he was thinking trilogy. That was kind of the standard for fantasy then, wasn't it?
Yeah, the classic format.
He even described himself as more of a gardener than an architect, letting the world grow organically as he wrote it, which makes sense for something this sprawling.
And he pointed to historical fiction himself, Maurice Drouin's The Accursed Kings,
No.
called it the original Game of Thrones.
Oh.
So, okay, he finally finishes this thing. It hits shelves in August '96. Was it like instant pandemonium, genre redefined overnight?
Not quite. Far from it, actually. It got really good reviews, don't get me wrong. Critics praised his return to prose. People were definitely eager for the sequel. They saw something special there. But sales-wise, pretty modest. A few thousand copies, maybe, initially. It wasn't setting any bestseller records right out of the gate.
Huh. That's surprising now? But it did win the Locus Award in '97 for Best Fantasy. And that novella from Danny's chapters, Blood of the Dragon, that won a Hugo, too.
Exactly.
So even with that slow commercial start, it was building this dedicated following, word of mouth.
Yeah, that speaks volumes about the story itself, doesn't it? Even before the TV show blew it up. Quality finds its audience eventually.
Okay, let's dive into the book itself. The narrative style is one of the first things people notice, isn't it? Third person, but tightly limited to one character's viewpoint per chapter. Switches around. And you're mostly seeing things through the eyes of the nobles. Some scholars argue that keeps you invested in those big aristocratic houses. What's the effect of that constant shifting perspective?
Oh, it's a masterstroke, really, because Martin uses those viewpoint characters. Well, they're often unreliable. Very unreliable.
How so?
Well, sometimes they deliberately hide things, they don't think certain thoughts, or they rationalize things in a way that conceals the truth from us, the reader. The classic example, which the show later confirmed, is Jon Snow's parentage. Ned knew, but his chapters never explicitly reveal it. He actively suppresses it.
Right. You're piecing it together yourself.
Exactly. It pulls you in, makes you work for it, creates this amazing sense of intrigue.
And that intrigue is woven through, what, 3 main plot lines that run concurrently? First, you've got all the political drama in the Seven Kingdoms.
Mm-hmm.
Westeros, mostly seen through the Starks and Tyrion Lannister. That's the game right there, isn't it?
That's the heart of it, yeah.
Yeah.
And this is where Martin really starts tearing down those fantasy tropes. You have Ned Stark, honorable, noble Lord of Winterfell, comes down south to be Hand of the King. In most fantasy, his honor would be his strength, right here. it's his downfall.
Totally. He plays by rules nobody else is following.
Precisely. And his execution, orchestrated by Littlefinger, I mean, that's shocking. That's the moment many people point to and say, okay, this is different.
No character is safe.
None. It was a clear signal, a really distinctive, original contribution right there. Broke the mold.
Then you jump way up north to the Wall. We see that mostly through Jon Snow's eyes. And that introduces a whole different kind of threat, something ancient, terrifying, moves beyond just, human politics.
Right. The Wall itself, this massive ancient barrier of ice, supposedly magical, defended by the Night's Watch and the Watch. It's presented initially as this honorable order, but you quickly realize, it's more like a penal colony. Criminals, outcasts.
Jon gets pretty disillusioned, doesn't he?
He does, but he also finds brotherhood there. And then the real threats start showing up. The others, the wildlings beyond the Wall, and those terrifying wights, reanimated corpses. That's where the story starts to lean more into the supernatural, forcing you to see Westeros isn't just about lords squabbling.
And plotline number 3. Across the Narrow Sea in Essos, we follow the last Targaryens, Viserys, and Daenerys, exiled. Their story starts in such a desperate place.
It really does. Daenerys' arc is maybe one of the most dramatic in the whole book. She's basically property at the start. Her brother Viserys trades her to Khal Drogo, the Dothraki warlord, for the promise of an army.
Just brutal.
Yeah. And that marriage, it's very problematic, especially at the beginning. Consent is murky at best. But paradoxically, it's through this situation that she starts finding her own power, her agency, her influence over Drogo grows, and it all culminates in that iconic scene, Drogo's funeral pyre. She walks in with those petrified dragon eggs.
And walks out unharmed with baby dragon.
Exactly. That moment just changes everything for her, for the story. Suddenly, magic isn't just rumor or history, it's back. Big time. Shifts the whole narrative towards the supernatural.
So, pulling back a bit, what does all this mean for the fantasy genre? Martin called it epic fantasy, but inspired by and grounded in history. Academics use terms like neo-medievalist or historical fantasy. But the big comparison or contrast is always Tolkien, right?
It's the unavoidable comparison, yeah. And Martin himself acknowledged Tolkien's huge influence, but he also felt Tolkien's world was maybe a bit too simplified, black and white.
Good versus evil.
Right. Whereas Martin wanted more gray areas. So while both used medieval sources, Tolkien drew more from myth and legend. Martin drew directly from the messy, brutal parts of actual history.
Like the Wars of the Roses.
That's a key inspiration. And his subversion of tropes, Ned's death being a prime example, that's what really marks it out. It challenged those heroic expectations, made it distinctive.
And that term neo-medievalist just means reimagining medieval settings with a more modern, often darker, more realistic eye, basically.
Pretty much, yeah. Taking the medieval framework but exploring it with a contemporary sensibility, often focusing on the power dynamics, the violence, the grit, rather than just idealized chivalry.
It's interesting, too, how magic, for a lot of the book, is kind of pushed to the background in Westeros. Feels almost like ancient history or superstition. People dismiss it, apart from the prologue and Daenerys' stuff with the Mogi Miri Mazdur.
Right. For large parts of the Westeros plot, explicit magic is pretty rare. That theme of a lost, diminished world where magic has faded, that's common in modern fantasy.
Well, the dragons hatching is even more significant then.
Absolutely. It's the big moment that firmly plants the flag. This is supernatural fantasy. Magic isn't gone, it's returning, and it's going to change the game. It tells you the world is bigger, stranger than you thought.
And the historical echoes, they're everywhere, even if it's not a direct allegory.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Wars of the Roses and the Wall. Martin literally said he got the idea visiting Hadrian's Wall in England.
Exactly. Those parallels ground the fantasy. Stark and Lannister mirroring York and Lancaster, the missing Targaryen heir sounding like the princes in the tower.
Even characters. Littlefinger, maybe echoing someone like Geoffrey Chaucer, lowborn, climbs high politically. Khal Drogo as a sort of Attila figure.
Those comparisons are often made, yeah. And the Faith of the Seven kind of resembles the medieval Catholic Church, though maybe less powerful in the story, at least initially. It's all woven in, making this invented world feel strangely familiar, unsettlingly real.
And it gives a really stark, kind of cynical view of chivalry, too, doesn't it? You take someone like Sansa Stark, starts off so idealistic about knights in honor.
And it gets a brutal reality check in King's Landing. Yeah.
What's really striking is how Martin shows the institutions of chivalry are often corrupt or decayed. The Night's Watch isn't a band of heroes. It's mostly criminals, the Kingsguard, chosen for politics as much as skill.
Even Jaime Lannister. He might follow some code, like not killing Ned in that duel. but he's operating in this deeply compromised, morally gray world. It shows how honor is often just a word, easily twisted by power.
Let's talk about the women in Westeros. That's a huge topic. So many female characters, Daenerys, Cersei, Catelyn, they start off defined by marriage, right? Political alliances, transfer of wealth. Dany is literally traded for an army. It's a chilling look at women as bargaining chips.
It is. That initial lack of agency is stark. But what's interesting with Daenerys, as we touched on, is how that situation, paradoxically, becomes the source of her power. Her influence grows, she makes decisions that shape events, culminating in the dragons. It's a complex path to agency.
But then you have Sansa, whose betrothal turns into basically being a hostage.
Yeah.
Shows the flip side, the vulnerability.
Absolutely. It highlights the dangers, the lack of control many women face in that society. It's a brutal depiction of navigating power structures designed to limit you.
And the depiction of sexual violence is something that gets discussed a lot. Martin himself and some fans argue it's historically accurate, reflecting the reality for medieval women, including marital rape.
It's definitely a controversial aspect. Daenerys' relationship with Drogo, particularly early on, is often analyzed in terms of, well, problematized consent or outright rape.
Yet she also tries to stop sexual violence later, doesn't she? Protecting other women.
She does. She intervenes with Drogo's warriors, claims women as her handmaidens to save them, though she isn't always successful. And Cersei, too, faces sexual violence from Robert. It's complex. It fuels ongoing debate. Are these feminist portrayals? Or just grimly realistic ones for the setting? There's no easy answer.
Motherhood is another massive theme running through it. You've got Catelyn Stark, fiercely devoted to her kids, but that fuels her hatred for Jon Snow, Ned's supposed bastard.
Right. And Cersei, her fierce protectiveness of her children is central to her character, but it's juxtaposed with ruthless cruelty, like ordering Robert's bastards killed. Motherhood is both fierce love and ruthless ambition.
And Daenerys becoming the mother of dragons.
Symbolically, yes. The descriptions are very maternal, the eggs lactating, the dragons nursing. Her potential to have children is even seen as a threat to Robert's rule. Shows the political power tied up in motherhood and bloodlines.
And what about kingship itself? Royal power is constantly being questioned. King Aerys, the Mad King, was a tyrant, led to civil war.
Then you get Robert Baratheon. Better than Aerys, sure, but shown as pretty ineffective, more interested in hunting and drinking than actually ruling.
Cersei basically dismisses his authority to his face.
Yeah, a clear sign his grip is weak. And this gets to the heart of power in Westeros. Ned Stark up in the north, he basically rules like a king there anyway, a role his son Robb then takes on, being proclaimed king in the north.
And it all comes back to that chilling line from Cersei to Ned.
When you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die. That just perfectly sums it up, doesn't it?
No middle ground.
Especially once Robert dies. The succession explodes, and it becomes a lethal free-for-all.
It's still amazing to think how this book, starting with those modest sales, became this global thing, the HBO show, Game of Thrones 2011 to 2019, that really lit the fuse again, didn't it?
Oh, massively. It catapulted the books onto bestseller lists, sparked endless discussion, academic papers, everything. The power of adaptation is incredible.
Though the show ended up going its own way, especially later on.
Significantly diverged, yeah. They aged up some characters, too. Sansa, Arya, Bran, Dany were all older in the show.
Even the graphic novel adaptation had issues, right?
Yeah.
Trying to adapt an unfinished series.
Yeah.
Dealing with sensitive content involving young characters.
Exactly. Predicting plot points, navigating legal issues around depicting minors. It shows the challenges when a story gets this big across different media. It's a complex legacy.
Undeniably huge. In 2019, the BBC listed A Game of Thrones as one of the 100 most inspiring novels, cemented its place. So from that spark of an idea in a frustrated TV writer's head, through this incredibly complex, genre-bending story that flipped heroic tropes on their head and mirrored real historical struggles, A Game of Thrones really gives you this deep dive into a world that feels both totally fantastical and somehow disturbingly real.
And thinking about how deeply rooted it is in those historical influences, what does A Game of Thrones ultimately tell us about power? About human struggles that just seem to repeat themselves century after century, even in made-up worlds. How does knowing about those real-world inspirations maybe change how you see the game being played, both in the book and maybe in our own history, too? Makes you think, doesn't it?